Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine you walk into your favorite clothing store, right?
Mm-hmm.
You pick up that pair of jeans or, that perfect top in the size you always wear. You're feeling pretty good about it.
Yeah, you know what you're looking for.
Exactly.
Ah.
You head to the fitting room, maybe even kind of anticipating that little boost you get when something fits just right.
Mm-hmm.
Then you try it on,
Mm-hmm.
and disaster. It's huge, absolutely swimming on you.
Oh, yeah, that feeling.
It feels like you grabbed the wrong size entirely, but you double-check the tag, and nope, that is your size. If that sounds familiar, that frustrating, confidence-killing experience, well, you are definitely not alone.
It is a remarkably common frustration for
Right.
so many people right now across different body types, but like we'll discuss, it's particularly challenging for those on the smaller end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And you're right, it's not just like a one-off bad garment or needing to try a different size that day. It actually points to a much larger industry-wide issue.
Right.
Something experts are now often calling the sizing crisis.
The sizing crisis. It sounds dramatic, doesn't it?
It does a bit, yeah.
But as we get into this, as we do our deep dive today, looking at this whole phenomenon, you'll quickly see that the term is, well, pretty much warranted.
Absolutely.
We're going to try and pull apart the layers of this problem, figure out how we got here, trace the forces that, keep it happening, and really explore who it's impacting most and how.
Yeah, our mission today is exactly that, to sort of peel back the curtain on this crisis. We'll look at the history,
Okay.
how consumer psychology got pulled into it, how recent fashion trends have complicated things even more,
Right.
and what the tangible real-world consequences are for shoppers. We'll also look at the significant financial hit this takes on the fashion industry itself.
Which is huge, as we'll see.
It is. And the surprising market opportunity it presents, maybe, and what potential solutions are out there. Ultimately, we want you to walk away understanding not just that sizes are inconsistent, but why.
Yeah, the why behind it. And what that means for your own shopping experiences, maybe even how you think about fashion and, well, body image too.
Exactly.
And the headline findings are pretty stark, aren't they?
Yeah.
We're talking about clothing sizes that have just fundamentally changed over decades,
Dramatically changed.
becoming way larger for the same number on the label.
Yeah.
A process that started kind of subtly, but then became this, competitive race among brands.
A race to the bottom, size-wise.
And then on top of that,
Yeah.
today's big fashion trends are adding another layer of difficulty, making even supposedly standard sizes bigger.
Yeah, that oversized look.
So it's this double whammy that's leaving a big chunk of the shopping population, especially people with smaller frames, really struggling to find anything that fits off the rack.
That's it. And that struggle has real financial costs and surprisingly big psychological effects, too.
Right. The article really lays out a situation where poor fit isn't just, an inconvenience. It's contributing to massive financial losses for retailers.
Through returns, mostly.
Yeah, returns, while at the same time creating these substantial emotional and money challenges for millions of consumers.
Exactly.
So how did we get here? How do we get to a place where grabbing your usual size feels less like a safe bet and more like rolling the dice?
Yeah, like a total gamble.
To really get the confusion today, we kind of have to go back in time, right?
As the necessary starting point, absolutely. The source takes us back to a really key moment in American fashion history, 1958.
Okay, 1958.
Yeah, this was the year the U.S. actually set up its first standardized system for women's ready-to-wear clothing sizes.
Before that, it was just all over the place.
Pretty much the Wild West, yeah. Highly inconsistent between different makers. So this 1958 chart was an attempt to bring some order, some consistency.
Okay, so 1958 standards. What was the size range like back then? And what did, say, a size 8 mean in those days?
Well, in that 1958 standard, the numbers were quite different from what we see now. Sizes went from 8 all the way up to 42.
8 to 42.
Okay. And what's really striking is that in that system, a size 8 was genuinely considered a small size, like really small. It was designed for measurements we'd probably associate today with maybe a 00 or even a 000.
Wow. Size 8 was the small end. Okay, fast forward to today. If you found a dress from 1958 labeled size 8, what size tag would it likely have now?
This is where you see the huge shift. The article highlights that a size 8 garment from 1958, it would most likely match up to a modern size 4 or maybe even smaller.
Like a 2 or 0.
Yeah, possibly a 2 or 0, depending on the specific brand and the style, of course. But that's a drop of anywhere from, 4, 8 numerical sizes for the exact same body measurements?
That is a lot. Can we quantify that change more, like in inches?
Yeah.
How much bigger have clothes actually gotten for the same size number?
The stats cited are pretty eye-opening. The article says that since the 1950s, we've seen an average increase of about 8 inches.
8 inches?
Yeah, 8 inches in the actual garment measurements for each women's pant size. And for bust measurements, in tops and dresses, the inflation is around 6 inches. Just think about that. An 8-inch difference in the waist or hip measurement between pants labeled size 8 today versus size 8 back then.
An 8-inch difference within the same size number. That single statistic really hammers it home. Let's use those examples from the source to make it even clearer. They compared a 1958 size 16 to a modern 16.
Right. So back in 1958, a woman fitting into a size 16 would typically have had a waist around 28.5 inches.
Okay, 28.5 inches for a 16.
Now, compare that to a modern size 16. What does that usually fit? A waist measurement closer to 36 inches.
36 inches. That's nearly 8 inches difference.
Almost 8 inches, yeah. In the waist measurement, all carrying the exact same label, size 16, it just clearly shows how the numbers on the tag got totally detached from their original physical meaning.
And the Marilyn Monroe example is even more striking because, everyone kind of knows her image.
It really puts that historical shift into focus, doesn't it? Marilyn Monroe, often talked about with 1950s sizing, was apparently a size 12 quite often. Her measurements were reportedly around a 34-inch bust and a 25-inch waist.
Okay, 34 bust, 25 waist, size 12.
According to modern sizing charts, those exact measurements today would put her squarely in a size 0.
Size 12 then, size 0 now. That's just wild. It makes you really question the whole point of the numbers.
It does. And look, this isn't just abstract history or celebrity trivia. It's something people experience directly, especially if they find vintage clothes. The article shares that relatable story from the fashion blogger, Sarah Kay.
Ah, yeah, the grandmother's wedding dress.
Exactly. Sarah Kay tried on her grandmother's wedding dress from 1962. Grandma wore size 10 back then.
Yeah.
When Sarah, who wears a modern size 2, tried it on, it fit her perfectly.
Wow. Size 10 fits a modern 2.
She called it a real eye-opener. A tangible proof of just how much sizing has fundamentally changed since that original 1958 standard. It just confirmed her feeling that modern sizes run way bigger.
That personal story really hits home. It makes you think, wait, if a 10 from the 60s fits someone who's a 2 today, what does my size even mean anymore?
Exactly. And this historical shift, as the article points out very clearly, wasn't just some accident. It wasn't passive. It wasn't because people's bodies changed that much.
Yeah.
It was a deliberate, strategic choice by retailers.
Ah, and that strategic choice, it has a name, right?
Yes, this brings us right to the core idea that drove this first wave of size inflation. Vanity sizing.
Vanity sizing. Okay, it's a term we hear a lot. Let's get a clear definition from the source. What is it exactly?
The article defines vanity sizing as the retail practice of putting smaller number labels on clothes that are actually physically larger than the measurements traditionally linked to that size.
So basically, making the clothes bigger, but keeping the number the same, or even shrinking the number.
That's it in a nutshell.
And the psychology behind it, it feels a little manipulative, sneaky.
Well, it's based on a very simple, almost primal psychological principle. The idea is when a consumer finds they fit into a size smaller than they usually wear, they get a little ego boost.
Ah, right. Fitting into a size 6 when you thought you were an 8 feels good.
Exactly. It can boost your self-esteem, make you feel better about your body right there in the fitting room.
And how does that good feeling translate into a retail strategy? Why do stores do it?
Retailers using vanity sizing are betting that this positive feeling, this little confidence lift, gets directly linked to the garment and the brand itself.
Oh.
You feel good in their fitting room, you're more likely to buy the thing, right? And maybe you'll even prefer that store next time because their sizes fit me better. It's selling confidence, a sort of perceived ideal, along with the actual clothes.
So it's a direct line. Psychological boost leads to more sales. And if one brand did this and it worked...
Bingo! That's how the article says it spread like wildfire. Once some retailers figured out this trick worked, boosted sales, made customers happier, at least temporarily, others felt they had to do it too just to compete. It escalated into what the source calls a sizing arms race. Brands kept inflating their sizes to make their customers feel smaller than they might in a rival store.
A sizing arms race.
Yeah.
And this led to some pretty extreme examples, didn't it? Showing just how far it had gone.
It really did. One of the most talked about examples the article brings up is J. Crew introducing the size 0. That was back in 2014.
Size 000. That just
Yeah.
sounds made up. What were the actual measurements for a size like that?
According to the source, the J. Crew 00 was designed for someone with about a 30.5-inch bust and a 23-inch waist.
Okay, 23-inch waist,
Mm-hmm.
size 000. Didn't we just say Marilyn Monroe had a 25-inch waist and was a size 12 back then?
Exactly. A 23-inch waist being a 000 in 2014 is just a stark reminder of how much sizes had already inflated by that point.
And what was J. Crew's official reason for bringing in this super tiny size?
They said it was demand from international markets, specifically mentioning Asian markets. They claimed their existing sizes, even their smallest ones, were just too big for many customers there.
Which is really telling, isn't it?
It is. It basically admits that their standard smallest U.S. sizes had already become too large for a big chunk of the global population they wanted to sell to. It wasn't necessarily a surge in tiny American customers.
Right, it just showed their existing small was already pretty big compared to historical standards. H&M also did something similar, a big shift in 2017.
Yes, H&M did what the article calls a complete overhaul of their whole sizing system. They essentially just recalibrated their entire scale.
Recalibrated how? What did they do?
They basically shifted all their existing sizes down. What used to be labeled a medium became their new small, a large became a medium, and so on down the line.
Okay.
And to make room for this shift, they had to introduce entirely new, smaller categories like XXS and a new size 0.
So it wasn't just a tiny tweak.
No, it was a systematic brand-wide change. It really reflected the pressure in the industry to kind of align with these vanity sizing trends that were already happening everywhere else.
So suddenly, if you were a loyal H&M shopper who always bought, say, a medium, you might find that size now just hangs off you. And you'd need a small, or maybe even smaller, depending on the fit. That just adds another layer of confusion for people trying to shop.
Absolutely. It just destabilizes your understanding of your own size, even within that single brand you thought you knew. You have to reevaluate everything. And then, making it even more confusing, is the fact that sizing also seems to differ based on how expensive the clothes are.
You mean like designer brands size differently than, say, fast fashion?
Exactly. The source mentions a study from 2003 that found expensive brands tend to run smaller than cheaper brands, even when they have the same number on the label.
So a size 8 blouse from a fancy designer might actually be cut smaller than a size 8 t-shirt from a budget store.
Considerably smaller, potentially, yeah.
Wow, okay, that's yet another variable thrown into the mix. You can't even assume consistency across price points for the same number. It's no wonder shopping feels like dodging bullets sometimes.
It creates this situation where your size isn't this fixed thing anymore. It's like a moving target that depends on the decade, the brand, the style, even the price.
Now, the article does quickly mention some supposed pros of this vanity sizing system, though they seem very much from the retailer's point of view.
Yeah, the claimed benefits listed are, that it makes some consumers feel better about their size, that psychological boost again.
Right.
That it can boost confidence in sales for the brand, the main commercial reason, and that it allows for brand differentiation, like brands can use their specific sizing to cultivate a certain fit or target customer.
But it's pretty clear from the article's overall focus that the downsides, especially for smaller consumers, are huge and way outweigh these retailer pros.
Oh, without question. For small-bodied consumers, the consequences are things like incredibly limited options, having to shop in kids sections.
Which we'll get into.
Yeah, the financial hit from alterations, trouble finding professional clothes, the list goes on.
This leads us to a really crucial point about the personal side of this.
Yeah.
How does this constant shifting and inconsistency, this vanity sizing telling you you're smaller than maybe you expected, how does that mess with your perception of your own body, your self-esteem?
That's a really important psychological piece the article digs into. While fitting into a smaller size might give you that temporary ego boost, the source notes that this false sense of body image satisfaction is inherently unstable. It doesn't last. Because sizing is so inconsistent everywhere else, that fleeting good feeling often just gets replaced by confusion and frustration when your size doesn't fit somewhere else, or even in the same store next season.
So it creates this mental whiplash. One store says you're a size 4, which feels good because of vanity sizing. But then another brand, where your body hasn't changed, might put you in an 8, or need major tailoring.
Precisely. It sets up these unrealistic expectations based on a number that's lost its objective meaning. And instead of realizing the sizing system is broken, it's really easy to internalize that frustration and think, oh, there's something wrong with my body, or I must have changed, when a size doesn't fit. It contributes to body image issues by creating this gap between the label and reality, breeding confusion and self-doubt.
Okay, so vanity sizing kind of set the stage, inflating sizes over the years, making the numbers bigger. But the article argues there's a newer, really powerful force making this sizing crisis even worse now, especially for smaller people.
Yes, and that's the huge dominant fashion trend favoring oversized fits.
It does seem like everywhere you look, especially with younger crowds, clothes are just designed with a much looser, baggier shape than they used to be.
That's exactly the trend the article identifies. The 2020s have seen what it calls an unprecedented embrace of oversized fashion. And it's not just like a niche thing, it's everywhere.
In everything.
Pretty much all garment categories, blazers, sweaters, jeans, t-shirts, even tailored pants are getting looser.
And who's really pushing this big shift in the fashion world?
According to the source, Gen Z is playing a huge role in driving and popularizing this trend.
Right.
As a group, they're about 30% of the global population, huge purchasing power, cited as $360 billion in the U.S. alone. So their preferences really shape fast fashion and mainstream retail.
And what specific parts of this trend are they really into?
The article points to the dominance of oversized sportswear. That's become a major look, especially influencing trends predicted for, say, 2025.
Okay.
And this preference for comfort and a relaxed fit is strongly tied to those shifts in behavior and what people wanted to wear coming out of the pandemic lockdown.
Right. Comfort became key.
Yeah. The source also gives a stat. Somewhere between 30% and 50% of Gen Z Americans are regularly wearing baggy jeans and other oversized stuff in their daily outfits.
So comfort and that relaxed shape, maybe kicked off by pandemic life, have now really cemented themselves as a major fashion direction.
Exactly. The main look right now prioritizes clothes that are intentionally loose, relaxed, comfortable, often with kind of exaggerated shapes.
Now, this trend might work great for a lot of people, or for those who just like the look. But how does the article explain the specific negative impact on smaller consumers?
Well, this trend makes finding clothes that fit properly exponentially harder for them. While some people can wear oversized pieces and get the intended look, relaxed, comfy, some volume.
Yeah.
Someone with a much smaller frame often just gets completely lost in all the fabric.
Yeah, the article had that quote from the college student Maya T that really captured that feeling.
Yes, Maya T, she's 5'2" and 95 pounds. She put it perfectly. She said something like, I love the oversized trend in theory. I see how cool it looks on others. But when you're 5'2" and 95 pounds, even the oversized look just looks like you're drowning in fabric.
Drowning in fabric. Yeah, that phrase really paints a picture.
She added, I can't participate in current fashion because everything is designed for people who are naturally larger than me.
It's not just about looking good. It sounds like feeling excluded, left out of what's happening in fashion right now.
It is. It limits their ability to express themselves through clothes in a way that feels current, just because the basic cut and volume of the clothes are simply too big for their body.
And this connects directly to another point the article makes for the listener. How do these current trends, this love for comfort and loose fits, specifically make shopping harder?
Right. As we touched on, it's that double impact layered right on top of the vanity sizing mess.
Okay.
The article explains that because comfort and loose fits are the main aesthetic now, even clothes that aren't explicitly labeled oversized are often just cut with more room, more volume than they would have been years ago.
Ah, okay. So it's not just that a size medium today has the measurements of an old size large because of vanity sizing.
Right.
But even that now larger medium is also cut looser than a medium used to be cut.
Precisely. It's a cumulative effect. Vanity sizing inflates the number, right? And then the oversized trend inflates the actual volume and looseness of the garment's cut, even in styles that aren't meant to be super baggy. This just compounds the problem for small-bodied consumers who are already finding that vanity-sized XXS or size 0 is too big. Now, even if they could find a number size that theoretically fits, the style itself works against them, adding way too much fabric and volume for their frame.
Okay, so we've got the history with vanity sizing, and now the current oversized trend making it even worse. Let's spend some time really focusing on the real-world impact this crisis has on small-bodied consumers.
Yeah.
What's the core fundamental problem they're facing?
The article puts it very bluntly. Small-bodied consumers face unprecedented challenges finding clothes that fit off the rack. Because even the smallest adult sizes like XXS or 0 have often become too large for them.
Right.
It's that combo of vanity sizing and the oversized cuts. The sizes available just don't match their actual body measurements anymore.
So if adult sizes are too big, what are let's call them survival strategies people are forced to use just to get dressed?
A big one the article discusses, drawing from online communities, is having to shop in children's departments.
Shopping in the kids section. What kind of stuff are they actually finding there that works?
Well, based on what people talk about in petite-focused groups online, like on Reddit, which the source mentions,
Okay.
adults struggling with sizing often end up buying basics, athletic wear, sometimes even shoes from the larger kid sizes, the junior or tween sizes.
And why go there? Is it just about fit?
Fit is definitely the main reason. The measurements in those larger kid sizes can sometimes line up better with a small adult body than a vanity-sized adult XXS. But the article also notes lower prices can be a bonus.
Sure.
But really, the main driver is finding anything that comes close to fitting.
Now, this brings up a really sensitive point the article touches on. What are the psychological effects on an adult who has to regularly shop in the children's section just to find clothes? It's got to be more than just inconvenient.
Oh, absolutely. The article points out it can be deeply emotionally challenging for adults. It can stir up feelings of inadequacy, maybe embarrassment, definitely frustration, and a real sense of being excluded from the adult fashion world.
It must feel kind of infantilizing, right? Like you don't quite belong, literally and figuratively, in adult society.
That's a huge part of it. You're stuck navigating aisles with clothes not designed for your age, often with kid-like graphics or cuts. And beyond just the emotional side, the article highlights a very practical, major consequence: how this affects professional confidence and social belonging.
How so?
Well, children's clothes, even the bigger sizes, usually lack the sophisticated styling, the tailoring, the professional look needed for an adult wardrobe.
Right. You might find a basic t-shirt or leggings maybe, but finding a blazer for an interview or a dress for a wedding or even just smart casual stuff, that's got to be incredibly hard, if not impossible, in the kids section.
Exactly. It limits your options for putting together outfits that look professional or fit in at certain social events where, a certain way of dressing is expected. It can feel like you're just locked out of fully participating in some parts of adult life.
Okay, so beyond the children's department, what other strategies are smaller consumers using to try and navigate this mess?
The source lists several other survival strategies. Things like actively searching for brands that are known, maybe through word of mouth or online reviews, for running smaller or being more consistent. Zara gets mentioned as one often cited for that.
Okay.
They might focus on clothes made from more forgiving fabrics, like knits or things with a lot of stretch, which can kind of adapt better to minor fit issues.
Makes sense.
And crucially, they rely heavily on online reviews from other shoppers, specifically looking for comments from people who mention having similar body types or facing the same fit challenges with that specific item.
Relying on other shoppers' experiences just to guess if something might fit. That really shows how broken the standard sizing system is, doesn't it?
It's become a necessary step for so many. When you can't trust the label itself, you have to turn to the shared wisdom of the crowd to make any kind of informed guess.
And if finding clothes off the rack is nearly impossible, even with these tricks, what's the other huge financial burden the article highlights?
The article really stresses the massive financial drain caused by needing alterations. For many small-bodied consumers, buying clothes is now just step one. Step two is taking it straight to a tailor.
And how much are we talking for these alterations? Is it just like a few bucks to hem something?
Not usually, no. The
Yeah.
article quantifies it. Even basic stuff like a simple hem can run you $10 to $75. But for the more complex alterations, which are often what's needed for smaller frames,
Yeah.
the costs can jump to $150 or even more per garment.
Wow, $150 plus on top of the original price.
Yeah.
That's serious extra expense.
It absolutely is. These costs can easily double or even more than double the price of clothes for petite shoppers. Think about it. A $75 dress needing $75 in alterations now costs $150. A $200 blazer needing complex reshaping might end up costing $350, $400 total.
And why are alterations for petite or smaller people often more complicated and pricey than just, say, shortening pants?
The article explains it's about way more than just length. You're dealing with issues like adjusting the armhole depth so it doesn't gape weirdly, shortening sleeves while keeping the cuff looking right, or physically moving the waistline on a dress or jacket. That needs serious skill, often taking the garment apart and putting it back together.
Okay.
It's about reshaping the whole structure to fit smaller proportions, which is much trickier than a simple hem.
This makes it sound less like an occasional treat and more like a necessary, regular line item in the budget.
That's exactly the point the source makes. It includes this powerful quote from Jennifer L., a marketing executive. She talks about having to budget $200 a month just for alterations.
$200 a month?
Yeah. She compares it to a second rent payment and talks about the frustration of wondering if it's even worth buying nice clothes when the tailoring costs add so much to the final price.
$200 a month just for alterations. That number really hits hard. It's not a minor hassle. It's a significant ongoing financial burden that many people just have to factor into their cost of living to have clothes that fit reasonably well.
It represents this fundamental shift in how clothing costs work for this group. Budgeting for alterations is now basically essential, not optional, for many who want to wear something beyond basics from the kids' aisle.
And just circling back, how do all these things, the limited options, maybe shopping in kids sections, the high alteration costs, reinforce those professional and social limits we talked about?
Well, as the article notes, if you can't easily find age-appropriate, well-fitting, sophisticated clothes without spending a fortune on alterations, it directly limits your options in professional settings with dress codes.
Right.
It also limits your social options, making it hard to find the right outfit for events, leading to feelings of exclusion and just plain frustration.
Yeah.
The simple inability to buy clothes that fit becomes this barrier to fully participating in certain parts of adult life.
And the psychological toll of this constant struggle, feeling left out of trends, frustrated by the lack of choice, the body image confusion from weird sizing, it all just accumulates, doesn't it?
It really does. The article highlights how this constant difficulty finding clothes that fit really messes with a person's relationship with clothing and self-expression. Clothing is such a fundamental way people show who they are, feel confident,
Yeah.
and that whole process is constantly filled with difficulty, extra cost, and compromises. It can really wear down your self-esteem and turn something potentially fun into a source of chronic stress.
Okay, so this isn't just a problem for the person trying to buy clothes. It has massive ripple effects for the fashion industry itself. The article puts a really staggering number on the financial cost to them.
It's an astonishing figure. The source states that retailers are estimated to lose roughly, get this, $1 trillion.
Annually. $1 trillion
That's right.
a year. That is just an absolutely mind-boggling amount of money. How has that loss mostly happened for retailers?
A huge chunk of it comes from returns. The article really emphasizes the direct link between clothes not fitting well and products being returned.
Okay.
It says poor fit accounts for something like 42% of all clothing returns across the whole industry.
Wow, nearly half.
Yeah. And when you look specifically at online shopping, sizing issues are the #1 most common reason people send stuff back.
That makes total sense. You can't try it on online, so the sizing is all over the place. You buy it, it doesn't fit, you return it. Simple as that.
Exactly. And this lack of reliability has fueled a specific consumer habit that's hugely expensive for retailers.
Bracketing.
Bracketing. Right. That's buying the same thing in multiple sizes because you have no idea which one will fit. Yeah.
Precisely. The article defines bracketing as ordering the same item in, say, 2 or 3 different sizes, fully intending to keep only the one that fits best and send the rest back.
And how common is that now?
The article notes that nearly half of all U.S. shoppers now do this, especially when shopping online.
Half.
Yeah, it really highlights how bad the sizing inconsistency is. Consumers feel like they have to buy multiple sizes because they just can't trust that their usual size will work. And while it helps the shopper find something that fits,
It must be a nightmare for the retailers. Oh, it's an enormous logistical and financial headache. Processing all those returns is expensive. The shipping back, warehousing, inspecting, repackaging, or maybe even having to sell returned items at a loss. This behavior contributes hugely to that $1 trillion figure.
so poor fit, driven by inconsistent vanity sizing and made worse by oversized trends, isn't just annoying the customer. It's directly hitting the industry's profits through massive returns and costly habits like bracketing.
It creates this deeply inefficient cycle where tons of product gets shipped out only to be immediately sent back, racking up costs every step of the way simply because the initial purchase was based on unreliable sizing info.
But is there a potential upside here for the industry, like a flip side to losing $1 trillion?
Absolutely. The article strongly frames the underserved petite and small size market as a significant, largely ignored market opportunity.
How big are we talking globally?
The global petite apparel market is estimated to hit a value of about $48 billion by 2025.
$48 billion. That's not small change.
Not at all. It's not some tiny niche. It's a multi-billion-dollar segment actively looking for clothes that actually fit them.
And is there proof that brands that do focus on serving this market actually see results, like real sales increases?
Yes, the article cites some pretty compelling evidence. It says brands that invest in creating proper, dedicated petite collections designed and scaled specifically for smaller frames, not just, shorter sleeves.
Right, actual petite proportion.
Exactly. Those brands are seeing sales bumps of around 25%.
A 25% sales increase just by actually meeting the needs of a group that's been struggling. That seems like a very clear business reason to do it.
It really shows the demand is there, and meeting it pays off significantly. The ASOS example is also highlighted.
The UK retailer.
Yeah, ASOS. They introduced really comprehensive petite lines across lots of different products and saw substantial growth directly because of it. The article uses them as a key case study showing the commercial viability of doing this right.
So the data shows this weird paradox.
Yeah.
An industry losing $1 trillion a year, partly because of bad fit, while at the same time ignoring a $48 billion opportunity to serve a group desperate for better fit.
Right.
It seems like fixing the problem is also the key to unlocking a ton of revenue.
It really highlights maybe some industry inertia, perhaps, or maybe a lack of understanding of what smaller sizes actually need beyond just being shorter, or maybe just focusing on other areas. But the numbers clearly make the business case for prioritizing fit consistency everywhere, including at the smaller end.
Okay, given the scale of the problem and this clear opportunity, how is the industry starting to react? Are there solutions emerging? Tech solutions, maybe?
Technology is definitely playing a role, trying to tackle the fit issue, especially for online shopping where returns are such a killer. The article mentions fashion tech companies actively developing AI-powered sizing solutions.
Right, like the TrueFit Fit Hub mentioned in the source.
Yeah.
How does that kind of tech work?
So TrueFit's Fit Hub is a good example. It uses this massive data set information from 82 million shoppers, analyzing sizing and fit across 30,000 brands.
Wow, that's a lot of data.
It is. And the idea is to give personalized size recommendations to online shoppers. So instead of just looking at a generic size chart or guessing, the AI uses all that data to suggest the size that's most likely to fit you in that specific item from that specific brand. It bases it on how similar shoppers with similar measurements and maybe buying histories found the fit.
So it's like using crowdsourced data and AI smarts to cut through all the brand inconsistencies, trying to reduce those huge return rates caused by bad sizing guesses.
Exactly. The article notes these tools aim to chip away at that roughly 40% of online returns caused by sizing issues by giving shoppers more confidence before they click buy. It's basically applying data science to try and fix a problem created by decades of inconsistent practices.
Beyond tech, are individual brands taking more direct steps, like changing their size ranges?
Yes, the source does note that some more forward-thinking brands are starting to respond by really expanding their overall size ranges to be more inclusive. Brands like Way get mentioned as an example.
What are they doing?
Offering a super broad spectrum of sizes, from XXS all the way up to 6XL, across their entire product line, not just having limited petite or plus sections.
Offering the full range in all styles.
Yeah.
That feels like a big step towards real inclusion.
It shows a commitment to actually designing for a wider variety of bodies right from the start. The article also mentions other brands are improving their online resources, putting up more detailed size charts that go beyond just waist and hip.
Like what?
Including things like inseam, rise, bust circumference, maybe shoulder width, more data points for shoppers to compare against themselves, and providing better fit guides describing how a specific item is supposed to fit, like run small, relaxed fit, true to size.
Okay. Let's swing back to the consumer side for a second and pull together those practical strategies we talked about based on the source's recommendations. If you're out there struggling to find clothes that fit in this crazy environment, what are the most useful things you can actually do?
Right. The article outlines several of those smart shopping approaches and survival strategies that smaller consumers use. These include being open to checking out children's or junior sections for basics, athletic wear, casual stuff where the fit might actually work better.
Okay.
Actively researching and looking for brands known maybe through reviews or online communities for running smaller or being more consistent.
Doing your homework on brands.
Prioritizing clothes made from forgiving fabrics like knits or things with stretch that have more wiggle room in the fit.
Gotcha.
Finding and building a relationship with a good tailor who actually understands how to alter clothes for smaller proportions, not just shorten things.
That tailor relationship seems key.
Thinking about the total cost of an item, including potential alteration costs when deciding whether to buy it, considering that cost per wear.
Right.
And making it a habit to read online reviews, really paying attention to comments from people who mention similar body types or fit problems with that specific piece.
That review part feels extra critical with all this sizing chaos. Leaning on the community for the real scoop.
It becomes essential, doesn't it? When the official size chart is unreliable across different brands, user reviews basically become this informal, crowdsourced sizing guide. It's vital.
And digging into that a bit more, one point the article connects to the listener is asking about specific steps, like tailoring. What can you do to make clothes fit better when the industry isn't helping much?
Well, beyond just finding a good tailor, the article suggests basically accepting that alterations might need to be a regular part of your clothing budget, like actually budget for it.
Treat it like a utility bill almost.
Kind of, yeah. It also suggests maybe focusing your spending on fewer, higher quality pieces that are actually worth the investment in tailoring rather than buying lots of cheap stuff that still needs work. And maybe for really basic things, learning some fundamental sewing skills could save some money and hassle on minor fixes.
So investing in quality and tailoring becomes a deliberate strategy to fight back against the industry's poor fit issues.
It's about taking back some control where the industry has created all this inconsistency and frustration.
The article also looped back to the history we discussed, asking how understanding that history, the size inflation, can actually help you navigate today's mess.
Yeah, and this is really important for that psychological framing we talked about earlier. Just knowing that today's size 8 is physically way bigger than a 1958 size 8, or that Maryland size 12 is like a size 0 now.
Right.
It helps you internalize that the problem is with the system. It's not with your body.
Right. So if you try on an XXS and it's still way too big, it's not because you're somehow freakishly large for an XXS. Right. It's because what XXS even means in terms of actual inches has been totally warped by decades of vanity sizing and these current oversized trends.
Exactly. It puts the issue in its proper place, an industry-created problem, not a personal failing or a sign that your body is wrong or unusual. It can help take the edge off that frustration and maybe quiet that negative self-talk when clothes don't fit like you think they should.
And finally, the article asked how current oversized trends specifically add to shopping struggles, which we also discussed, but maybe can summarize quickly here.
Right. As we said, it's that compounding effect. Even if you ignore vanity sizing for a second, if current fashion just dictates that a shirt is cut really loose and roomy for a relaxed vibe, that inherently makes it bigger, then you combine that trendy, looser cut with the underlying size inflation from vanity sizing. And it means even a numerically small size ends up being excessively large and baggy on a genuinely small person. The popular aesthetic just adds another layer of difficulty right on top of the historical sizing problem.
Okay, so we've covered the roots, the current factors making it worse, the big impact on consumers and the industry, and some solutions starting to emerge. Let's look ahead. What does the article suggest is next for fashion sizing?
Well, the source thinks that underlying tension is probably going to stick around, maybe even get more intense.
The tension between vanity sizing and oversized trends.
Exactly. That tension between wanting to make customers feel good with small numbers and the practical reality of trends, which right now favor bigger, looser clothes. It's a tricky balancing act for brands.
Makes sense. The numbers might keep creeping up, but the actual cut is also generally bigger.
Yeah. And the article brings up a really critical connection here, linking this whole sizing mess to broader concerns about sustainability.
Ah, okay. How does bad fit and inconsistent sizing relate to environmental issues?
Well, think about all those returns, especially from online shopping, driven by poor fit. That contributes massively to fashion waste. Return items need reverse logistics, more shipping, more emissions. They need processing, storage. And if items are damaged or just can't be quickly resold, they might end up in landfills or get incinerated.
Right.
Plus, all the resources and energy used to make clothes that end up needing tons of alterations or just never get worn because they don't fit right. That's just wasted environmental cost.
So as the fashion industry faces more pressure about its environmental impact, The sheer inefficiency and waste caused by poor fit becomes much harder to just ignore.
Exactly. Fixing the sizing crisis isn't just about making customers happy. It's increasingly being seen as a necessary step towards a more sustainable fashion system. Fewer returns because clothes actually fit. That helps the planet and the bottom line.
Are there any potential rule changes like regulations on the horizon that the article mentions?
The source floats the possibility that, maybe driven by all this consumer frustration and the sheer scale of the problem, some regions or countries might start thinking about regulations.
Regulations for what?
Pushing for more transparency, maybe even some standardization in sizing metrics. That could potentially force brands to stick to clearer standards, cutting down on the wild inconsistency people face now. It's speculative, of course, but the problem is getting so visible, it could lead to calls for government action.
We touched on this before, but just briefly revisiting the professional and social impact. Is this likely to remain a barrier for people?
Unfortunately, yeah, the article suggests that until consistent, truly size-inclusive ranges become the standard, small-bodied adults will probably keep facing limits finding appropriate clothes for work and might still feel those psychological effects of being excluded from mainstream trends and just a constant shopping frustration.
The article also wraps up with recommendations for both consumers and the industry, right?
Yes, a quick summary. For consumers, use those smart shopping strategies, research brands, read reviews, budget for alterations, focus on quality pieces worth tailoring, maybe learn basic sewing.
Oh, and for the industry?
The message is pretty clear. Acknowledge the crisis exists, invest seriously in making clothes that are consistently true to size across a wider range, develop proper petite collections scaled correctly, and use that fit technology that's becoming available.
And maybe one of the most powerful points the article makes is framing this whole thing not just as a business issue or a consumer hassle, but as a matter of social equity.
Yeah, that framing really hits home. The argument is, look, the industry has made some welcome progress in being more size-inclusive for larger bodies, right? With the growth of the plus-size market.
Definitely.
But at the same time, they've let the sizing standards at the smaller end inflate so much that they're effectively excluding a huge group of people. Human bodies come in all sizes, that diversity is constant, but the industry's definition of standard has shifted upwards, leaving millions underserved just because they have smaller frames.
So real inclusivity isn't just about adding bigger sizes, it's about serving the entire natural spectrum of human shapes, including those at the smaller end who are currently being left behind by these trends and practices.
Exactly. It raises that fundamental question, who is fashion actually for? And does the industry have a responsibility to cater to the full range of body diversity instead of letting millions struggle just to find basic clothes that fit?
So what's the overall path forward suggested by the article to tackle this big, complicated crisis?
The conclusion seems to be it needs a combined effort. The industry needs to acknowledge it and implement consistent sizing, design properly for smaller frames. Consumers need to keep advocating, keep sharing information, keep the pressure on. And we need continued innovation in tech, in design, in production to make sure everyone, whatever their body type, can find clothes that fit and make them feel good.
It really sounds like a problem that's deeply dug in, with decades of history behind it, but also one with clear solutions and potentially big rewards for whoever decides to really tackle it.
It truly is. It just highlights how something as seemingly simple as a number on a clothing tag connects to all these complex issues. Consumer psychology, retail strategy, global trends, company profits, personal well-being, environmental impact, and even these bigger conversations about social equity and who gets represented.
Okay, let's do a quick recap of this deep dive into the fashion sizing crisis. We started by looking way back at the history.
Right, how women's sizes have inflated massively since 1958. That old size 8 is tiny by today's standards.
Driven initially by vanity sizing, that psychological trick in the sizing arms race between retailers like J. Crew and H&M.
Then we looked at how the huge trend for oversized fashion now in the 2020s, influenced heavily by Gen Z's love for comfort and baggy fits, is layering right on top of that vanity sizing, making even regular clothes cut bigger and really compounding the problems for small-bodied shoppers.
Which leads to that very real, often super frustrating impact on those consumers, facing these unprecedented challenges finding clothes that fit.
Sometimes ending up in the kids section.
Yeah, with all the psychological stuff and practical limits that brings, and bearing that significant financial burden of constant, expensive, complex alterations just to make things wearable.
We also saw the massive hit to the industry itself, losing around $1 trillion a year because poor fit drives so many returns and encourages costly habits like bracketing. It just shows how inefficient the system is.
But at the same time, we identified that multi-billion-dollar market opportunity in properly serving the petite and small size segment. Examples like ASOS show it's commercially smart to do it.
Absolutely. And finally, we explored some of the responses starting to happen, tech solutions like AI sizing tools trying to cut down online returns.
Right.
Some brands expanding their size ranges more inclusively. We outlined those practical survival tips consumers use, research, reviews, tailors, and we looked at the future.
The sustainability link.
Yeah, the waste connection, the potential for regulations, and framing this whole thing as a critical social equity issue, the industry neglecting a big part of the population.
Hopefully, this whole deep dive has given you, our listener, a much clearer sense of why shopping for clothes can feel so random and frustrating right now.
Yeah, understanding the history, the psychology of the current trends, it helps put it in perspective. It's an industry problem built up over decades. It's not a personal failing when a size doesn't fit like you expect.
And maybe here's something to think about next time you're looking for clothes. Given this long history of size inflation, the clear multi-billion-dollar opportunity in serving smaller customers, and the huge financial and environmental cost of bad fit, why do you think it's taking the fashion industry so long to really, truly fix this and meet the needs of all body types, instead of letting millions keep struggling with clothes that don't fit and cost a fortune to fix?
Or maybe think about that environmental cost we discussed, all the waste from returns and alterations because of poor fit. Does knowing that maybe change how you approach online shopping? Maybe make you double-check measurements more or read reviews even more carefully before ordering 3 different sizes.
It definitely makes you pause and think about the bigger picture behind something as simple as a clothing size tag. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the sizing crisis in fashion.